When it comes to entering in data in this form, it's important to me that the customer name isn't left blank, that we actually have the customer's name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a macro that's going to check this field before the record is saved to make sure it's not blank, because if it is, it won't save the record. And also, let's add another condition to it. Not only will it not save the record, but it'll take the cursor if they jump to another field and put it right back to the customer name. It stays stuck there until they actually enter in a name, okay? So to make these changes and to assign the macro to this form to check this field, I'm going to right click and go to the design view. I want to bring up the property sheet for the form, and you can do that one of a few ways. You can either double click over here in the blue area, brings up the property sheet for the form, and not just whatever I have selected over here like the city, the contact button. Just make sure when you bring up the property sheet to click in the blue area, or click on this little square box that will select the form here. Then on the Event tab, down here where it says Before Update, in other words, before the form is updated or the record is saved, I'm going to attach a macro to it that's going to check it for these conditions to make sure that this field right here is not blank, and if it is, to not save the record and also dump them back into this field. So here we are, Before Update. I'm going to click on its Build button because I want to build a macro. Double click on Macro Builder, opens up the macro that's tied to the customer info form. First thing I want to do is to type in a comment that explains what this macro is all about. This is just to let everybody who opens up this macro know that the purpose of the macro is right here, the first comment. I'm not going to assign any actions to it. I'm going to go down to the second row, and I still don't want to assign any action because there's got to be a condition, like an if-then. Well, if this is blank, then do this action. So we're not looking at actions, we're actually looking at a condition. So come up here in the Show Hide group and click on Conditions. It adds another column here. And what's the first condition? Well, it's going to be the customer name field left blank. So the field is going to be open square brackets. This is how we define the field, or what field to check. And then customer, close square brackets, and then space is NULL. That's the coding you're going to type in for this condition. First, the name of the field in square brackets, and then the word is null, null meaning empty. And then hit enter on the keyboard. So the condition is if it's empty, then what action do you want to perform? I'm going to click on the drop down arrow and say to cancel the event. And you can read more about what this does down in the action arguments lower right hand corner. In other words, the validation fails, that there's nothing within that field, then use this action to cancel updating of the data. So it won't save the record. Well, how about if we go ahead and click over here and then type in what this is going to do. See how I'm spelling this out? So if you opened up my macro in my database, you could say, oh, it's to require data entering the customer name field. This is what this line of code is, the condition and the action, what it does. Now let's go to the next one. Now when it comes to entering in more than one condition or more than one if-then statement, as it were, always the second condition is going to be followed by three little dots, or entering an ellipsis. In other words, we wanted to be able to attach multiple actions to one condition. This is the condition, here's going to be the action. Now what I want to do here is I wanted to be able to attach multiple actions to one condition. In other words, I've got my main condition here. If it's blank, then cancel the event. But also, when the event is canceled, I want to be able to attach another action to take that person back to the customer name field, or put the cursor back in there. So it tells them two things, that hey, you're stuck here until you enter in something, and plus I saved you the work of having to move your mouse or shift tab to go back into the customer name field. So dot dot dot, three little dots there, is the ellipsis code here to attach this action to this condition up at the top. So I can have 20 or 30 actions all tied to the same condition. That's the condition, and then dot 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 to tie all the other actions to that same condition. Hit the tab key. This is the action that's going to be tied to this condition here. And it's going to be the, let me type it in, go to control. Hit enter. I'm in the action arguments, but still for this line of code here, down in the action arguments, whether I'm in the action or the arguments, it still has the same code down below the control name. In other words, I want to come down here and say that I want you to go back to the customer name control, the one that they tried to leave and save the record on. And you can see it doesn't matter anywhere within this row here where I click, the action argument down below, control name, is still there. So what I want to do is I want to come down here and say, what control do I want you to go to? Well, I want you to go back to the customer name, the one that's empty, so you can enter in the customer name. So down here I have to type in or define that field. Again, how do we define fields? Open square bracket, customer name, and close square bracket and hit enter to make sure that it accepts the code here that I typed in down below without any prompts or errors. Okay, again, for those who later come in and want to know what the heck's going on with my macro, let's type in some more comments here. ... because again that means that we're attaching this action to that condition. And we'll say in our comments and hit enter. Okay, here's how it's going to work. We have the comment of our macro, what it's supposed to do, and then down below we actually have the two actions tied to one condition. Here's the condition. Is the customer name field blank? Yes. If so, then don't save the record. Then after that, if the customer name is blank, then go to the control, which down below is the customer name field. So it'll be a reoccurring nightmare for him until he actually enters something in that customer name field before it allowed them to save the record. Now when you're finished, be sure to save your work for the macro, close out, and let's take it for a test drive. I'm going to come up here and click on the View button to go back to my form view. And then down below I'm going to click on the New Blank Record button. And then let's go right to customer name, or let's just skip that and type in an address. And then let's go ahead and try to save it. So the moment I try to hold down the Shift key and hit enter, notice two things. First of all, that little pencil here is not solidifying into a triangle to let me know that it's saved the record, or in this case it's still writing the record. And it took me right back to the customer name. Even if I come down here and type in the postal code and then try to Shift enter to save the record, it takes me right back to the customer name. That's pretty cool in that they can't get out of here until they enter in the customer name. The problem that we're running into now is that for the front-end user who's trying to figure out what's going on here, I don't want calls saying, hey, the database is broken. Every time I try to enter in a record, it takes me back to the customer name. Okay, it's pretty obvious to us, but we can take it one step further. You want to watch the next training video on message macro, because we're going to tie a message to this macro. It tells them you must enter in a customer name. That's why you can't save the record. So when I want to get out of here and I don't have a record to save and it's still in write mode, just hit the escape key on the keyboard, clears it out, and of course be sure to save your work here. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.